collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, the guaranteed minimum income comes into force. We'll speak to Labour Minister Zeta Emilianidou.
For the first time, they will have all the necessary amounts to cover their basic needs, their rent, if they have any rent, the interests of any loan, and I believe that they will be in a position to have a decent life.
Classical archaeologist Joan Breton Connelly challenges accepted thinking on the Parthenon in her new book.
This interpretation has not been questioned in 230 years, and what I do in this book is to look at the Parthenon as one looks at other Greek temples, and to ask, what is the founding myth? What is the story from distant Athenian myth that is celebrated in the rituals at the Parthenon for nearly 900 years? And it is a gripping story.
And concerned citizens are demanding a halt to illegal works on the Cyprus coastline.
Where they went again with bulldozers and they put cement to create a kiosk. That's a Natura 2000 area, and it's an important area for a specific species of a bird.
Now, it's taken a long time and a lot of hard work, but last week Parliament finally passed the bill for a guaranteed minimum income, or GMI as it's called, which is slated to replace other welfare benefits. The legislation was prepared by the Labour Ministry, and I'm joined on the Cyprus News Digest today by Cyprus Labour Minister Zeta Emilianidou. Zeta, what difference is this going to make to the people who so far have been on, for example, benefits if they're unemployed for just 6 months? Now they'll get help a little longer, I think.
Yes, exactly. We believe that with the new legislation we will be in a position to assist a lot of people that now they are suffering, and they will have the chance to submit an application to examine all the necessary elements and the provisions of the law, and they will be in a position to have assistance from the state with the GMI, and for the first time they will have all the necessary amounts to cover their basic needs, their rent, if they have any rent, the interests of any loan, and I believe that they will be in a position to have a decent life.
We saw a lot of opposition initially in Parliament from the MPs, and I know that there were quite a few amendments made. What basically were those amendments? Has it changed the basis of the GMI?
No, at the end only one amendment. That is a minor amendment. It's about the date of the loan of anybody. If, according to our proposal, it was that you will be eligible for the payment of interest for any loan if this loan was agreed before the enactment of the legislation.
Okay, so you're avoiding people taking out loans now in order to get extra help?
Yes, according to the new provision, if you have a loan 1 year before the submission of your application for the GMI, then you are eligible. So it's not an issue.
It was a tweak rather than a real amendment.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, when we talk, for example, about people's assets being taken into account, can you clarify that for me? Because it has crossed my mind, and I'm sure you'll put me right, that people who are paying rent are going to get help with their rent.
Yes.
People who are unemployed who already own outright their own homes, if that asset is taken into consideration, are they still eligible for help?
Yes, if they have their own house, then we will not consider the value of their own house. But if they have another immovable property, that the value is up to 100,000 euros, then they are eligible.
So if they've got two houses, maybe they're renting out one, but then they're getting an income.
Of course, and then maybe they are not eligible for GMI. But according to the provisions of the law, if you have a house that is up to 300
square meters.
Yes, then they are eligible. But if they have another immovable property that is exceeding the total value of 100,000 euros, then they are not eligible.
So there are going to be a lot more people, presumably, I think you've said, who are now eligible for some form of assistance, because since the haircut and the bail-in and so on, there are an awful lot of people now out of work and on the breadline, basically. Where are you going to find the extra money to give these people the help they need?
As the Minister of Finance said to the Parliament, there is no problem for the government to give this 50 million euros that we will need for 1 year. Now we will need about 20 million euros, and we believe that because it's a major change and we need to assist all these people, we will give this money to assist these people.
So it's coming from a government pot somewhere, but you're going to have to fund it long term. Now, I know that we hope once the recession is over, there will be a drop in unemployment, there will be fewer people needing this assistance. But nevertheless, if it's going to be sustainable over time, it does need to be funded. So long term, where's the money coming from?
We believe that in the long term we will not have so many unemployed people, so we will not have these numbers of eligible people for the GMI, but we will have an effort to see all the other benefits, who are the eligible people for the other benefits, so we believe that we will be in a position to find this money.
And talking of other benefits, disability allowance and those sort of things, again, we've seen reports in the press that these are being cut. What actually is the position? If I'm in a wheelchair and I'm also unemployed, do I get still a disability benefit and the GMI?
Of course. You will be, somebody will be eligible and for the disability benefit and for the GMI. Nothing will change from the previous situation for these people.
And pensioners, they're the other group that have been much touted as going to lose out in this. What's the position of a pensioner?
No. They will not lose, but they will gain a lot of benefits that are now, according to their scheme, they don't have. They will be eligible for care if they need care, and all the people of this age maybe they will need care, so they will not lose any of their benefits, but a lot of people that they will be eligible for the GMI, they will have extra benefits.
They'll still get their pension?
Of course, of course. If they are not eligible for the GMI, then they will still get their pensions.
But if they are eligible, it'll be instead?
Yes, but this amount that they will have from the GMI will, in no circumstances, it will be less than their pension.
So it looks like it's going through, it's going to be implemented, I think now there's a lot of work to do before early September. And are you obviously going to assess how it's working and get feedback from people once it's in place?
Of course. It will be implemented from Monday, not from September. At the end of September, we believe that we will be in a position to send the necessary checks, but we will start to implement the GMI from Monday. We will send all the applications, we will have the applications at the various post office, so anybody can have his application. They will fill all this application and we will check them, and we believe that we will be in a position at the end of September to send the checks for the GMI.
And in the meantime, people will continue to get their unemployment benefit or their other benefits?
Everything. nothing will change.
Well, hopefully a lot of people are going to be better off and a little further from the breadline. Zeda Emilianidou, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
Now, there's a lot of digs been going on for years in this part of the Mediterranean because Cypriot archaeology is pretty well, I might say, second to none. With me on the programme this evening is Joan Breton Connelly. She is a classical archaeologist and she's been working in the area for many years. Joan, welcome back. It's a long time since we spoke. What have you been up to?
Oh, it's lovely to be here, Rosie. Thank you. Well, I've just finished our excavations, our New York University Ieronissos Island excavations, the small islet just off the coast of Paphos at Aios Georgios tis Paias. I've been digging for 5 weeks with undergraduates from NYU along with our team of experts.
And have you found anything?
Well, this is a thrilling area. Our excavations over the past 24 years have revealed a sanctuary to Apollo that thrived exactly on the reign of Cleopatra VII of Egypt, the Cleopatra.
So it's all very exciting, and I'm sure that that'll be ongoing for a little while, and we'll hear all the results in the future. But what I really asked you on the programme to talk about was your book, which was launched, I think, here in Cyprus at the end of June. Tell us all about the Parthenon Enigma.
The Parthenon Enigma is a rethink of our most iconic building, arguably the most iconic building in the Western world. Since the 18th century, we have lived with an interpretation of the Parthenon, and in particular the frieze, that sculpted relief band of 525 feet of sculpture that rings around the peristyle. This was first suggested to show the Pan-Athenaic procession, that is, the annual procession in honor of the patron goddess Athena. This was suggested rather gently, thrown out as a query by two English gentlemen, travelers, amateur artist and architect James Stewart and Nicholas Rivette in the 1780s. Well, this interpretation has not been questioned in 230 years, and what I do in this book is to look at the Parthenon as one looks at other Greek temples, and to ask, what is the founding myth? What is the story from distant Athenian myth that is celebrated in the rituals at the Parthenon for nearly 900 years? And it is a gripping story of how we have discovered the myth behind the images, and I tell it in this new book.
I know it's a fairly fat book. I've seen copies of it. So you can't tell us the myth probably in 5 minutes, but can you give us a little hint?
Absolutely, and I will say it's fat because it has 150 pages of notes at the back, which you don't need to look at, but which are there for the scholarly audience who will want to examine this suggestion very carefully. But the narrative itself is a highly readable exposition of this tale, which we knew about. The story of King Erechtheus and his wife, Queen Praxithea, and their 3 daughters. This is one of the most famous kings in Athenian myth. He, of course, gives his name to the Erechtheion, that building with the Porch of the Maidens that stands right beside the Parthenon. Now, we knew that Euripides, the great playwright, had written a tragedy about Erechtheus, named the Erechtheus, and first performed in the Theatre of Dionysus at Athens in about 422 BC, 10 years after the completion of the Parthenon. We had only few lines of it, however, until the 1960s, when papyrologists working in Paris were able to take a mummy casing. This is a mummy casing made of papier-mâché from the Hellenistic period, 3rd century BC, and they found a way to steam apart the layers of paper, that is papyrus, that had been glued together to make the hard case. In doing so, they recovered 150 new lines of the play, giving us a total now of 250 lines, enough to have the plot. So, this exciting tale tells the story of the first outside threat to Athens. A barbarian horde from Thrace is surrounding the Acropolis. And King Erechtheus goes to the Delphic oracle and says, "How can I save my city?" And the oracle gives a dark answer: "You must sacrifice your youngest daughter." Erechtheus goes back to Athens and he tells Queen Praxithea this horrible result. And he says, "What shall we do?" And Queen Praxithea then makes one of the most patriotic and civic-minded speeches in all of Greek tragedy. She turns to her husband and says, "Of course I give my daughter to save the city. No one family, not even the royals, should put themselves above the common good. If I had sons, wouldn't I send them into battle? I have only 3 daughters, so I will give one so that all my people may live." And so they sacrifice the girl, the battle ensues, and as promised by the oracle, the Athenians are victorious. But unexpectedly, her husband Erechtheus is killed in the battle. And very unexpectedly, her 2 older daughters had made an oath that if their little sister died, they would leap off the cliffs of the Acropolis in a suicide pact, in solidarity with their sister. All for one and one for all, they wouldn't let their little sister die alone. And so what happens in the text that is relatively newly recovered, we get the final speech in which Athena appears to Praxithea, who stands alone on the Acropolis, and she says to her, "Bury your husband in the middle of the Acropolis and build a temenos, a precinct to him." This is the Erechtheion, the building of Erechtheus. And then she says to Athena, "And bury your 3 daughters in a common tomb, and build a precinct to them." And this is the Parthenon. Of the maidens, the word means. And then Athena says, "And you will be the priestess of both spaces, and only you will have the right to make sacrifice at my altar." This is the charter myth of Athens. In this way, Euripides explains what are these 2 great buildings on the Acropolis, Erechtheion and Parthenon. It's very simple. They are both temples to Athena, but one was perceived to rest atop the tomb of Erechtheus, and the other was perceived to rest atop the tomb of the 3 Parthenoi, the 3 maidens. That is the Parthenon. And then in this contract, which is a charter contract for worship at Athens, Athena makes Praxithea the first priestess of Athena Polias. What is extraordinary is that in historical times, the priestess of Athena Polias, a hereditary priesthood passed down in the same family for nearly 900 years, this priesthood was unusual because that priestess looked after 2 temples, not one, which was normally the case, both the Erechtheion and the Parthenon, and these 2 temples shared a single altar. Most temples have their own altars. The reason that we have a sharing here is on the model of that founding family. Praxithea is the model for ritual in historic Athens. She is the priestess. And so what I say in this book is that the frieze depicts not a Panathenaea of historic times, but the Panathenaea, the first Panathenaea, in celebration of the incredible self-sacrifice that the royal family took on in order to save their city. Sacrifice is at the heart of democracy. In a democratic system, no family puts itself above the common good, even the most elite. It's a very beautiful message. And so what I say is above the door of the Parthenon, we are actually looking at a scene of the preparation of Praxithea and Erechtheus preparing their daughter for sacrifice while the 2 older sisters stand at the side. And this is what the Athenians valued most about their society, that no one was exempt from the sacrifice necessary to keep democracy going.
You're obviously thrilled by the whole story and you make it very moving, if I may say so. But it does go against the accepted story, as you said at the beginning. So what happens next? Are you, all these notes at the back of the book, you're waiting for people to come along and say, no, that's not how it happened? Or for them all to say, wow, we never thought of it that way before?
Well, I'm sure a little of both will happen. I will say that I've been talking about these ideas for a very long time. And in 1996, I published a scholarly article on the kernel, at the core of this interpretation. What I've done in the book is to batten down this interpretation, looking sideways at other temples, at Olympia, Delphi, Nemea, Isthmia, and if I can show a pattern of the way in which architectural sculpture is used to celebrate the founding myth of that site, which we have at Olympia very clearly. Now, I will say that when I first expressed these ideas in 1996, of course there was a shudder by those who embrace orthodoxy and the traditional way of viewing things. There has been something of a sea change since that time, I would say, especially amongst members of the younger generation, people that, first of all, have not written their own books about the Parthenon, or people that have been educated under new methodologies. There's been a huge shift in the last 30 years, 35 years. We look at Greek religion. Everyone knows much more about Greek religion and myth and narrative and landscape and memory.
And you're going to be changing a lot of those memories for the older generation as well as giving new ideas to the new. Where's the book available?
It's available at the Mouflon bookshop here in Nicosia and, of course, in various online sources.
And it's The Parthenon Enigma by Joan Breton Connelly. Fantastic story, Joan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
Online and as a podcast, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Other stories in the news this week. At the request of opposition AKEL, Parliament has postponed voting on the legislation designed to tackle football hooliganism, with the main objection being the provision of fan ID cards. The government, however, is not prepared to compromise on this point and has the backing of the police, who say that hooligans' anonymity must be removed and that ID cards are an absolute necessity. There have been complaints from environmentalists that a new beach bar, which has opened on the turtle nesting beach at Asprokremos in the Paphos district, is endangering the green and loggerhead turtle breeding grounds, which have been protected by law since 1971. And the Troika of international lenders are back in Cyprus this week for their fifth review of the country's economic adjustment programme. And it's widely expected that they'll be looking very closely at the rising level of non-performing loans. This is the Cyprus News Digest. I'm Rosie Charalambous. Do get in touch, cyprusnewsdigest@gmail.com.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
The Cyprus Natural Coastline's Citizens Initiative has been up in arms about illegal coastal works. It's happening, and it has, of course, for years happened all over the island. But in particular, this time, it's areas of the east in Paralimni and near Ayathekla that have brought down the wrath of people who want to maintain Cyprus Natural Coastline. Maria Hadji-Mikhail is from the group. She's with me now. Maria, exactly what sort of things have been going on there that shouldn't have been?
This year, particularly, what has happened, it was a series of interventions. So one of the interventions was at the Yedriada, where some of the natural flora of the area was cut. And afterwards, they took sand and expanded the beach to add more umbrellas and sunbeds. And also at the area of Gaparis, which is one of the last uncommodified, if you like, areas of the eastern part of the island. There were bulldozers. We have videos with bulldozers in the sea breaking the rocks to create a beach in those areas.
Now, in some areas, people would say that this probably is a good thing because it enables businesses to set up and bring more tourists. But the particular concern, I think, in some of the areas where this has happened is that not only are they Natura 2000 sites, but they are also fragile, ecologically speaking.
Mm-hmm. So in Agia Thekla, where it was the Sotira municipality in that area, where they went again with bulldozers and they put cement to create a kiosk. That's a Natura 2000 area, and it's an important area for a specific species of a bird. And in the area of Prodaras, it's not it doesn't have a protection status, but the interventions are going to have a negative impact on how the natural system of the sea has.
What has the House Environment Committee done about this? Because I read an extraordinary report in the Cyprus Mail which suggested that several members of the House Environment Committee actually made excuses for the mayors who were responsible for this illegal work. That surely isn't true.
It is, I'm afraid. And we've seen it happening with the songbird poaching example. It's a very strong one, where it's the same MPs giving excuses to mayors or poachers. So it's the same MPs giving similar excuses that follow on we need development, and so on and so forth. So what has happened in the Environment Committee, they had a discussion with the mayors and some NGOs.
Is it true that they actually let off the mayor of Sotira by saying it was a new municipality and so it was very unfair?
Yeah. So there was that excuse saying, that it's a new municipality, so it's unfair to be harsh on them. And also the regional authority, the eparchos, the district officer, he would also give excuses saying that it's unfair to be harsh on Paralimni and Sotira, whereas there's worse things happening on different municipalities in Cyprus.
And yet it is the district office that is ultimately responsible for giving permission or withholding it, isn't it?
Yes.
Has there been any comeback on them for the way they've handled this?
No, there was one letter maybe about a month ago there was an article in the newspaper where the Minister of Interior sent a letter to the district officers to say that they should be more strict with implementing.
But it's a bit like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted, isn't it? The damage has been done. Can anything be done to put it right?
They will need to do a proper environmental restoration assessment. One of the things the mayor in Sotira said, but now we'll do an environmental impact assessment now, but it's too late.
They've already made the impact, haven't they?
Yes. So you can't come afterward. Environmental impact assessment, it's the assessment you do before you get a permission to do an intervention in the coastal zone area by law, by European law and national law. And they didn't do it, and they come now and say, we'll do it now, but it's done. You can't do that.
It is done. The damage has been done. What sort of sanctions can be brought to bear, and by whom? Because it seems that maybe this has been going on, as I said at the beginning, around the island for so many years. People seem to think that if it's a fait accompli, they'll get away with it. We perhaps need to make examples of some of these incidents so that they'll think twice before they do it again.
Exactly. At the time, it doesn't seem that's the case. They're being laid off by everyone.
But who is ultimately responsible for making sure that the rules are followed?
I think it's the Minister of Interior that needs to be very strict about it, and the regional authority. But everyone's throwing the blame to the other.
Nobody's taking responsibility. Yeah. And what about this issue of sanctions? I mean, do we have laws that mean municipalities, for example, can be fined if they do this sort of thing?
There's the EU law, which hasn't been transposed into a specific national law yet. So even though we have to follow the protocol, that's an EU one, we still haven't transposed it into a national legislation. So that's leaving a grey zone on what the government can do. But we're ready to take it to at the EU level if nothing happens.
Very convenient, isn't it, that it's just being left on ice while all of this goes on.
Yeah.
What's the group's next move as far as all of this goes?
We were asking because one of the things that people are accusing us in a way is that we're focusing on the municipality in Paralimni and Sotira. So that's because we're from that area, so we know what's happening, we can see what's happening. So we're asking from people from across the island to get in touch with us from our Facebook group and follow us and let us know what's happening in different areas. We already submitted an official complaint to the Ombudsman, so that's under investigation. So once that's done, we can know whether we're able to go to court. If the authorities don't do it, we'll have to do it, or go to the EU and make an official complaint there.
And where can people find out more about the whole of this campaign?
On Facebook, we have a group that's called Cyprus Natural Coastline, and the rest is a citizens' initiative for the protection of natural coastline, but it's in Greek. So if you type Cyprus Natural Coastline on Facebook, then you can find us. And if I can also bring up quickly, they're trying to do an amendment in the town planning law at the moment. And what they're trying to do is add the coastline and the sea in the town planning law. And that would allow the Minister of Interior at the time, whoever that may be, to give a permission for a development on the coastline or in the sea, like marinas, marine aquaculture,
parks.
Maybe.
So that's another step backwards.
Yeah. We're going to try and start a big campaign in August about this, because they're going to continue discussing this in September. So thankfully they're closing now, so we have some time to get people involved and get some MPs involved that would be willing to vote against this law. So that's something that's coming up. And I think this law, it's related to what our initiative has done, because the initiative did make a big fuss about this issue. So now they're trying to find a different way around the intervention, so try to make it legal. So that's the next step that we need to follow.
Okay, well, I wish you every success, because there's very little unspoilt coastline left in Cyprus. Maria Hadji-Mikhail, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.